Hello, hello. Welcome to another episode of Be Open and Authentic with Rohit. Today we have Denise with us. So Denise is a rock star in the corporate tech world. Yes. So she created two high impactful accelerator programs, which also sets the template for many other corporate companies. So which is pretty huge. And Denise was also a founder who had a successful exit. And fun fact, Denise took 1 year off to travel around Europe, which I can only imagine. I really want to do it, but I'm not sure whether I'll be able to do it at some point. So there are quite a few things for us to learn from Denise, and which I'll try to capture all in one episode. I'll give my best shot. So, firstly, thank you, Denise. I know you are in middle of so much work, but I really appreciate you taking time to, do this episode with me. It means a lot. Thank you very much.
Yeah, of course. Happy to do it. Happy to support it. So thank you for having me.
Perfect. Thank you. Just a little disclaimer before we get started. So whatever the thoughts we express or the opinions we share, these are all very personal and doesn't represent the company we both work for or we worked in the past. So these are just personal, and we'll try to keep it simple anyway. Cool. So Denise, you wanna start with an introduction?
Sure. So I'm Denise Quashie. I am based out of New York City. I work for Amazon Web Services. I lead our global programs and events team, also the creator of the Impact Accelerator program. So I've been at AWS for 4 years. And you've already mentioned, but prior to me being at AWS, I had my own startup. And I've worked in tech and marketing is really kind of my background. So.
Nice. So before, I just want to ask this, right? I've seen, how much work it is to start these accelerator programs and run these continuously. And, if I look at your background, I see that you have been always on the hustling mode, So it's just a lot of work. So after all these, years, where do you get this motivation to work hard? And how do you get this energy?
Yeah. I think it's in my DNA. I think it's my dad. I grew up in a household where, my dad, he's actually originally from Trinidad, and he came to the U.S. and he ended up joining the U.S. military. So, and we joke about it today, but we always joke about how many jobs he's had. Like he's been a firefighter, a police officer, the sheriff's department, the military, like he's done everything. And so I think it's just kind of been instilled in me to always want to do more, right? And to just always be on a hustle grind. And not necessarily from a financial perspective, but mainly just because we get one chance at it, right? And so to do the things that you're super passionate about, and then when you're no longer learning or you're no longer passionate about something, it's time to make a change. And so I think it's just kind of been, distilled in my DNA because of my dad. I blame him for wanting to kind of do so many different things and be passionate about helping people and serving people, essentially.
Yeah, that's what you're essentially doing currently, right? Taking multiple roles and playing in Accelerator program. There are quite a few roles to take up, and you are leading it all with your team. But the part that you are helping so many other founders is pretty big, and this is what I like about the current job, right? If you are in a big tech company, there is a lot of things that you can do, but only if you want to do it and if you have the vision to do it, though.
Yeah.
Right? Because if you look at the Accelerator programs that you created. So, the company has been here for last 20 years, but nobody has the vision or the intent to do it. Maybe they had it, but it just takes a lot of, hustling work, connections and navigating, to get the buy-in from, CEO. So it's just a lot of work, but the impact is worth it, right? So because, since I've seen it personally, I got so much inspired and motivated during this program because most people, are just try to, help the companies maybe just by talking or by providing some guidance. But the thing with these accelerator programs, it's so much beyond that. They give the network connections and the capital, which most of the people, are not set to give. So this gives so many startups a good motivation and a leeway to experiment. And, they have everything they need to succeed in this accelerator program. So I think currently the impact is, may not be visible immediately, but that's in the long way. I can see how big it can grow and the real impact that it can create. So how do you feel about all of this, and what do you have in mind about these accelerator programs?
Yeah, so it's interesting because, prior to November of last year, my team and the work that I did was nothing, related to accelerator programs, and literally got the green light on November 1st to run this program. And from November 1st to April 1 is when the press release dropped, right? So we had hustled all throughout the holidays. And now today, it's like 70% of what my team focuses their time on. And so we essentially created a whole new market, a whole new team, a whole new product.
Yeah.
That we can offer to startups that we weren't even thinking about, last year this time, right? And so it's exciting and rewarding at the same time to be able to create this whole new segment of programs that are for startups specifically that are consistently being overlooked, right, and counted out. And so providing them an avenue and seeing the reward instantly is a huge amount of success personally and just rewarding.
I totally agree. I think the rewarding that you can see instantly is only very little, but the change or the impact that it can create in the long run is like 100x in my opinion. But yeah, so and thanks for doing all of it. There are many other folks like me who, even though who are not in startup, they just still get to learn more and learn something from the program and from you as well. So which is pretty great. Thanks for that. So I just want to go back a little bit and talk about your startup experience. So can you briefly share what was it and how what your experience was?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a different journey of being a founder and creating a startup. But, today, often you see entrepreneurs that want to be an entrepreneur, want to be a startup founder. It was nowhere on my radar of wanting to do that years ago. It was happenstance. I essentially fell into it. Just like many startups that are created today, I had a problem. I couldn't find a solve for it. And so I built a solve for that problem I had. And it seems very small and silly to some, but my problem was that I wanted to figure out how to monetize my pet's influence on social media. My dog had a large following on social media and brands were contacting me, but I didn't really have a good understanding of how to transition that into financial reward. At the time, mommy bloggers were making tons of money from brands, and pet owners were being contacted by brands, but they didn't have the understanding of how to make a deal that wasn't free dog food or free pet toys, right? And so I knew that if I created some sort of education behind that we could have our own conferences. I didn't want to go to the mommy conferences. I wanted to get to a conference about pets and how to manage the influence of my pet on social. And so we started with conference and educations and had a conference called Bark World. And we ran that for a couple of years. And then we quickly realized, based off of that data, that the conferences are like time bound. Like events are great for meeting people, networking, and getting instant information. But when you leave that conference, you're left to your own devices to try to figure out how to put that, pen to paper. And so we wanted to create a more always on platform that provided ongoing education. In addition to that, a marketplace where influencers can find gigs. So think of it as like TaskRabbit, right? TaskRabbit, you have a particular skill set, you're an engineer, or, you can fix, you're a plumber, you can go on there and look for gigs, and you can select a gig, and then you go out and you do the job and you get paid. Essentially, that's what we created. We created a marketplace where pet influencers can go online, see opportunities to make money, see how much those bids were. So for example, maybe a Petco wanted to, they had a new product coming, they wanted someone to test it, and then they wanted someone to do a blog post and then post on Instagram about it. They would see that bid and that gig, they can bid on it, and then Petco can see on the backside, on the admin side, how many bids they had, and they can select the number of influencers they wanted to select, and then the job was done. The influencer did it.
Nice.
I, of course, made a percentage of that. And then both the customer, Petco, and both the influencer are then happy. They're connected. They made the gig and the deal is done, right? And so that was essentially the concept of what we came up with, and we built that platform. And then we ran it for an additional couple of years. And that's when we started having conversations about a potential acquisition and what that looked like. So in short, again, I wanted to solve a problem because my dog had influence. I was tired of free dog food. There was no education at the time for pet influencers. And that was essentially the concept of what we created.
That's great. Finding a problem or trying to solve the problem that you have, which is the very key to any startup founder, right? Because if you create a problem and try to solve it, you can never sell it, but you observe the problem and you try to solve it. And the similar pattern that I see with the accelerator program and this one is, even this is new market that is innovated, right? The market exists, but the platform to solve for it doesn't exist. So similar to the accelerator program, the need is always there, but the solution or the way to solve it, or at least for the company standpoint, it doesn't exist. So that is something that was innovated, and now the whole domain exists, right? And similarly, if I think about it, so even after the accelerator program, people, it's not just about being in the program and going out. It's about how you can still stay connected and how you can network and still continue to stay engaged and learn from the community. I think that there is another whole idea behind itself. Maybe we both can partner on it, I guess.
I agree. I think beyond, the cash component on the education, there's the community, which, we don't necessarily talk a whole lot about, but being able to quickly identify and find people that look like you, that are building something as well as you are and have similar problems, or they have addressed some of the problems that you haven't been able to address. Like, that alone is, priceless. That ability to find and connect with like-minded individuals, and to kind of share resources on a peer-to-peer basis, and in an environment that is small, where you feel safe immediately to share your crazy ideas or your challenges in an open, intentional environment. And so that's essentially what we wanted to create. And I think we were really successful in that matter.
Definitely, right. And this whole thing just streamlines the process and, cuts the time short for the founder. They don't have to go elsewhere to figure out something or find some connection or, quickly experiments and get the ideas around. So I think this just streamlines everything and really helps the founder to succeed. And at least they have all the things that they need to succeed. So yeah, I think, you've done a great job with it again. So again, going a little back to the startup that you had, right? Did you have to raise any money or you were just successful just bootstrapping it?
Yeah, so I was initially successful. I don't know if you consider successful, but I did bootstrap it. I actually cashed out one of my 401ks and used that initially to bootstrap myself. And then I had savings and I utilized that as well. And then I took on a round of friends and family, then to kind of get things moving a little bit further. And then at that point is kind of when I started what I consider to be customer back, right? I started receiving generating revenue, because brands were so excited to finally have a dedicated place, because like the Iams, the Purinas, those types of brands that are dedicated to pets and dogs, they were going to mommy bloggers, right? And so mommy bloggers at the time were having to weigh, okay, do I post about Purina or do I post about diapers, right? And so the posts were not as often as like a Purina would have liked. But if Purina could find that dedicated, pet owner that all they talked about was pets, right? It's a much more narrow focus and higher engagement for them. And so just based off of us creating the space, they were excited. And so we immediately got a lot of customer revenue just because of that. Like, oftentimes you see in marketplaces, there is a larger demand for the user part, the expert, right, that is going on and wants the gigs versus the brands and the opportunities. We actually had more brands and opportunities than we had influencers. And so we had to shift our go-to-market strategy to kind of boost that because we had more opportunity than we had individuals. So I say all of that, from a cash component, we were lucky in that regard to have a problem that we were able to quickly figure out and solve that no one else was even in that space. But then after that, once we started to really kind of build out this marketplace platform, because everything was very admin, we were using very, very, very just like spreadsheets and things to kind of keep things track of. We were using WordPress. And so it just wasn't as intelligent as we would have liked to have been. And then I'm a non-technical founder, right? So I didn't really have the understanding or the skill set to really kind of build something. So in order to kind of move to that next level and start bringing on people, I took in an angel round, and it was, a friend of a friend, a past employer that had moved on from his startup. And so just by having those relationships, I was able to bring in a large angel round. And then that ultimately helped me kind of build a platform. And that's what essentially got us acquired.
Oh, that's great. So without even having any tech platform, just by quickly building a solution with whatever you had in place, you were still able to generate money, and then you raised the angel round to build the platform again. So I think you were quickly able to identify the product market fit. Maybe because the need exists, I think it was easier, but still doing some quick hack around to really, build the solution and have something in place. I think that's a good lesson, because if you are a tech founder, I'm not sure whether I should have done this, because as a tech founder, I would normally be like, hey, I want to create this awesome platform because I know the problem space, but I really want a tech solution for it. I don't think that should have worked for this kind of products, though, because there are many many disadvantages of being a tech founder in this sort of spaces, I guess. Right.
Yeah, and I think the thing that was very different for the space that I was in is that, pets is a very it's a very family-oriented, earn trust type of relationship you have to have, right? Your dog or cat can't tell you if the food you're giving them, they don't like it or it upsets their stomach or things like that, right? And they're a family member, the way we look at pets today. And so, earning trust in that community is so high. The bar is so super, super high that I think that we were really able to really focus and change the narrative on how to build a really authentic, empathy-driven community about pets. And by doing that, that allowed us to have a strong, high engagement. So we didn't have 1 million pet owners like you see some of these marketplaces. They say, oh, we have, 500,000 users, right? And we didn't have that, but what we did have is we had a very strong, high engagement, dedicated community that took it very personal as it relates to the health of their pets. And so because of that, when brands came in, we were very intentional on who we brought in and if it was the right fit for our community. And so I think because of that, it made it a little bit easier for us to have those conferences, which is really kind of the bread and butter of what we built,
Yeah.
right? We were able to grow those
Yeah.
relationships because of the conferences. And so the
Yeah.
line of our business from conferences is really what kind of substantiated us and allowed us to kind of build that strong, community. And then by that, then, it made it easier for us to go to an investor and say, we have this high engagement with our community, our SEO,
Yeah.
our click-through rates, et cetera, is so high. Like it would be silly for us not to build some technology around it. So.
Yeah, that's great, right? So working backwards from customers and building the trust with customers, which is very hard to gain and build. I also see that your marketing and branding experience came into play here because that's what it is. You were able to build a narrative very well, and by understanding customer needs, you build the narrative, you establish the trust, and then you eventually found a way to monetize it, which is pretty good. So I see that before you started you had the startup, you worked on some of the marketing and branding agencies at big tech companies and some other companies. So did that help you play a role of a successful founder here? How those experiences shaped your approach towards the startup?
Yeah, I don't know. I'm so much more smarter today from working at Amazon than I was years ago. But, one thing I did really well when I worked at Oracle was building relationships. I ran their partner marketing. So being able to kind of take those experiences and understand, like really truly listening to the customer, I think that was probably one area that I was able to kind of bring in. So I was able to kind of really understand the two sides. So what was kind of happening is there was the pet influencer that was really kind of taken on the persona of their animal, right? And so they took on the persona of their dog or their cat. And so trying to engage with them on a human level was a little bit odd because they were always in that first person animal character, right? But I came from, tech and corporate where I was working with those large enterprise customers and selling Oracle packages and services to partners. And so I was able to kind of see both sides to be able to say, if we were going to build a partnership program around this, how would I communicate that, one, to the end user, right, the pet owner, and then communicate that up in a way that enterprise customers would completely understand and see the value prop. And so I think that my understanding of, selling and building packages for enterprise customers certainly helped me be able to kind of communicate on a one-to-one level with those large CMOs, et cetera, of the Purinas and the Petco companies to kind of sell the value prop and be almost the agent of these influencers so they can continue to do what they do and stick in their character and not have to try to figure out the complexities of running a contract through a large enterprise company. Like we templatized all of that to make it so much more easier for them where it was a click of a button. They didn't have to think about it.
Wow, that's great. And I like the way that you explained this as well, going back to what the things that you observed when you were at Oracle, running these partner programs, and then how you used those learnings and the lessons from it and applying it here, which is pretty good. Thanks for sharing it. And I also want to just curious here, right? Because I've been speaking to multiple Black founders here. They said that they're still. I see that the stats are really against Black founders in terms of raising funds, which eventually impacts the success of the company, right? So, did you had to face any of these challenges, or because for you, trust building has been the most successful factor in your startup? So did you had to face any trust issues just that you are a Black founder, or how was your experience during it?
Yeah, I mean, it was a little bit different, right? Because when you're coming into a space where you're taking on the identity of an animal, people don't know who you are truly, right? There are social influencers out there with cats and dogs, like think like Grumpy Cat. Nobody knew who Grumpy Cat was for years, right?
Yeah. Yep.
And they just saw the cat, thought it was a cat, but it wasn't. It was a human behind it. And
Yeah.
so it allowed you to kind of build up a relationship with brands and other influencers based off of that, right? It was so just basic fundamentals of, you love pets, I love pets. We're
Yep.
communicating and having a good time online, right? But once we started looking at the business aspect of then starting to try to talk to brands and others, or like the in-person part of the conferences, I mean, sure, there were people that were shocked and surprised that I was the person, behind it. And
Yeah.
so, there was a lot of those weird instances that I had that, I look back on and laugh at today, and really odd conversations I had with people. But I think, I think since the murder of George Floyd, I definitely think there's been a big change in how brands and other entrepreneurs and VCs are looking at Black founders, but the numbers are still so depressing to see the disparities and how hard it is to kind of get moving. And then, we're starting to see a lot of that change as well, too. So there's a little bit of a decline that we've seen since 2020 with Black founders getting, VC funds, especially as we start to look at a potential down market, right? So there's still a ton of work to be done. I do think that it's something more that we talk about. Back when I was starting up, we didn't even talk about it. There were many people that said never put, like, hey, Denise, don't put your photo on your website. Like, you just, in the about section, you probably shouldn't even do it, right? That was the advice that we were giving each other back then. Today is very different, right? It's very different. So I think things are changing in a good way. But when you look at the data, it doesn't suggest it. So.
Yep, exactly. So, and it's also a little bit of my experience, right? I've seen it was I don't know how or whether I should even talk about these things before George Floyd. And lately, as I started interacting more, as I started realizing more, then I started realizing these are the things that we should really talk openly and discuss about it, right? And it just makes our life easy, and everyone's around. It just improves the lives of so many people. If we should have done this, I don't know why we had to wait until 2020 or 2022 to realize that, hey, we should just start talking about it more openly. But at least glad that, we started doing more of this. And going back to this thing, right, where maybe the funding landscape has changed a little bit, but there are tons of work to be done. So since many people are in this path, so I just want to understand, or I just want to ask you this: what are the suggestions that you would give to other Black or women founders on navigating this space? Do you have any suggestions on this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the big thing for me of lesson learned, like when I was starting up, I was so insulary in my own community. And I think it's important for, people like me that are building to try to expand out of your where you feel most comfortable, right? Because oftentimes, we're leaning on our communities to tell us, where to go or what to do and those types of things. But we don't have a lot of examples in the Black community, right? Yep. And so if we already don't have a lot of examples, then we don't have the connections and we don't really know what we're looking for. And so I would encourage those to kind of get out of your comfort zone and put yourself in places that allows you to kind of see what straight white men are seeing and doing every day. Because oftentimes those are closed communities, but now we can kick those doors open. And so it may seem a little odd or scary at first, but I think it's important to kind of get out of that. And, if you work in tech, I definitely would say utilizing those resources you have at the company that you're at as well, too. People are, like we just talked about, people are much more open to talking about these things. But, just in our own communities, we just don't have enough examples or people to point to and say, hey, how did you do this? And so I think it's important for us to kind of get out of our communities and try to find those that
Yep.
are a little bit more widespread and broader in nature in order to kind of get that insight.
Yeah, exactly. I really like this advice because we only know what we see around us, but we don't have any examples. And we need,
Exactly.
and since we are in the early stages of this, this phase, we need a lot more exposure to how others have done it and what others are doing, just so that we can learn from others' experience and build a successful company, so that in the future we become the examples for other people to look at, so that they don't even have to go elsewhere. They can just easily tap on to the people around them just to get all these examples. I really like it.
Yeah.
Thanks for sharing it.
Yeah.
So now I want to...
And the only...
go ahead.
Sorry, I was just going to say, I think the only thing else I would say about that is for those that are women or those that are Black and have been able to be successful, it's so important for us to kind of make sure we're looking back as well too. That, sometimes we're still so far on, still trying to get to where we need to get to. But I think that's a big other challenge we have in our communities, that we don't always look back and bring somebody with us. And so I think it's important to make that distinction as well.
So when you say looking back, is it more learning from our own communities, or like what exactly are you referring to here? Maybe just a naive question, but want to clarify?
I mean, I think it's a little bit of building programs, and I think it's also a little bit of investing back into, right? So,
Gotcha.
when I think about a lot of those that have made, a large round of funding, or even those that are athletes, right? And they have this disposable income. I get so annoyed when I see them, at strip clubs and things like that, and just throwing this money out. And I just think like, gosh, how many startup founders could use that money to take their idea to the next level, right? And so we've got to be able to start thinking much smarter in the way that we're spending our money and creating generational wealth. And I think we're kind of there, but there's still a big part of our community that is still so far on the grind that they're not thinking about building programs, or when they are creating something, they're not thinking with the intention of how can I expand this or bring somebody with me to help me build it out.
Yep. That makes a lot of sense. It's not that, okay, well, you are successful or you're good now, but how does it matter to the community, right? That you got a lot of from.
Exactly.
Maybe extending a hand, or maybe in one or the other way, maybe just supporting kids, or maybe helping some other startups, or creating some mentorship or other stuff. Whatever the form it can be, we really should look back and start helping us. That way, we evolve as a community, right? Because if not, one person's raise, even if one person is a trillionaire, it doesn't matter to anyone else around, because if they're not creating the support system that helps other people to raise and go beyond. Oh, that's great. So I'll take this with me. On the other side, I also want to ask you this question, right? So why do you think VCs haven't been investing in the Black or women founders a lot, and why? The follow-up to that is why you think they should really be investing in this space? Yeah,
again, I think it is based off of what you know, and you don't know what you don't know, right? And so I don't know if there is, and again, I'm Black, so I wouldn't be invited to it, but I don't think there's any sort of like VC gathering where they're thinking of how they can continue to not let Black people in. I don't think, but who knows, right? I wouldn't be invited if there was. But I think that they are a very boys club driven type space, right? Where it's who you know. And so it's like, hey, I know this person I went to Harvard with, or, my sister's boyfriend's cousin's best friend is creating this thing and I'm going to introduce you to them, right? Or, my frat, we went to school together and, those types of things. And so they are investing in communities that they're familiar with, and communities that have had a warm intro. And so if we don't have those connections, right, then they don't know about us, right? And I think that that's part of the problem, is that we are insulary and often kind of staying in our own spaces, and they don't hear about it. And then when we do get those meetings, they can't always identify with the product, right? And so it's a little bit of education on our end, which completely sucks. But it's also a shame on their end for not expanding their arsenal and their own communities to try to find different innovative ideas. So I think it's a little bit of both of that.
Both. I agree on it. And it's more of an education on both ends in one or the other way. It's about, okay, we are going in our own paths. How do we start, converging onto a same path? So some people has to really go above and beyond, even though it might be awkward to go and, talk to some other people that we never spoke to. But some people have to do it so that they lay the path that can converge and eventually set the playing field very, very level the playing field, right? So that's true. Yep, and I've been talking to other founders on this, right? Particularly black founders and women founders, they have all the traits and the characteristics that builds a successful founder, be it resiliency or the empathy or the feeling of the sense of the community or giving back. So there are so many things in these founders, so which are often overlooked by VCs, I believe. So. And these make you a successful founder, which, I mean, if you look at any successful company, these are some of the basic principles they followed to build a successful company, right? So, which I mean, and these are all inherently, or these are all already present in most of these founders. So which means, if I have some money and if I want to invest, these are the people that I would really invest in, because most of the times it's not just the product, it's about the culture and the company that builds a successful, company or the product eventually. So what is your take on it?
Yeah, I mean, I think that oftentimes, there are these inherent biases, right, that they automatically assume things about individuals. And, you see the same thing when it comes to hiring as well, too. But I definitely think that, when I created the Impact Accelerator program, one of the things I wanted to really try to get across to the executives at Amazon is that this is not a charity, right? Black people are not looking for a charity. Neither are women, right? They are looking for a chance to explain to you what they're actually building. And so I think that it's the giving them that opportunity to just get into the room, to be invited to sit at the table, and they're making assumptions that they're not going to know, they can't really contribute, they're too early. There's all these other things that they would never say to someone that's the sister's, brother's, cousin's best friend that they were introduced to, right? Sure. And so they're just automatically counted out. And, what I wanted to kind of get across is that, with the Impact Accelerator, I'm not looking for this to be some sort of a charity where we're just giving money away to anyone, but we're still looking for high potential startups. They just happen to be Black, or they just happen to be a woman, and they just never been invited to the table. And that's the reason why we have the program. We don't have the program because it's a charity. We have the program because these people are always just counted out based off of who they are or what they look like, right? Or, their sexual orientation, and so they're still engineers, they're still developers, they're still building amazing products and companies. They've just never been given the opportunity to talk about it. So,
agreed. And it's really the high time to open those doors and open the perspectives and mindsets as well, that, hey, just give a chance. Right? Why not? Because it's not that you are betting everything on one particular company or one particular person anyway. So since you are diversifying, and why not just give a shot to the people that were never heard of or that were never given a chance. And it's not that we are asking. The interesting thing, right? It's not that we are asking anyone to invest on a particular person or based on the the cultural or the individual personality traits. We are still asking them to invest in a particular company. So if they
Exactly.
if they can still evaluate the company and not the person itself to make the investments. If they don't like the idea, that's fair, but it's not. It doesn't just have to be based on the
Right.
person, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Agree.
So hopefully these things changes, and I kind of agree that after George Floyd things have been changing. And still a long way to go. Hopefully these will take a huge leap, and I like how these accelerator programs are contributing to change the scenario. So now we are telling the VCs that, hey, there are really some high impactful companies out there. So it's your time. If you're going to miss the bus, it's going to cost you more later. So I think
Exactly.
it's more of a game for VCs that, hey, we need to get in this. If not, yeah, we might miss on a bigger opportunity here. So I like the way
Yes.
how these are creating the exposure and opening the gates at the doors for so many people. So glad things are going the right way. And thanks for all your contributions. I really appreciate it. So yeah, and want to diverge a little bit here. We spoke about your startups and the work and the other stuff. Now I want to shift a little bit to your 1 year break to travel around Europe. So what made you take the break? And because particularly it comes to the financial aspect, right? If you are missing out 1 year of finances, that's still a lot to miss on.
Yeah.
And or maybe, but if you consider the mental gains or the gains for mental health, that might be worth it. But what
Yeah.
was your thought process behind taking that time off?
Yeah. So I had been working, I joke with my parents, but it's like I've had a job since I was like 12 years old, and probably even more like 10 if you count me and my friends going around cutting grass. So when I was 10,
Wow.
had my own like grass mowing business. So, for me, it was when you're building a startup, like all the responsibility is on your shoulders. Like it was the most
Yep.
stressful, most anxiety driven thing I've ever done in my entire life. Like I can't even tell you how much blood, sweat, and tears literally I had in building that, because it's such an enormous amount of responsibility, especially when you have people working for you. When you have people that
Agreed.
say, I believe in you and I'm going to quit my job that I'm making money on to come work for you for equity or for nothing or for a little bit of money, like it's insane, right? And so
I
that's
know.
such a huge amount of responsibility to take on, and everything is on your shoulders. Everybody asked me questions. Like I was the stopping place for the answers. And so
Yeah.
constantly being asked questions from 6 a.m. to 5:59 a.m. the next day, like it's very stressful, very stressful. And
Yep.
so for me, with with it being acquired, it was like this final just like moments, right? Where I could just take a
Yeah.
breath and not have to stress out about anything. And I slept for a long time. So like I traveled for a year, but I slept for like literally 3 months straight. It felt like I did nothing but just like sleep. And then from
Nice.
there, I was like, okay, well, what am I going to do now? And I mentioned earlier, my dad was in the army. And so, I was actually born in Germany and I went to high school in
Oh,
Germany. And so it was more of like a going home type for me for traveling for a year in Europe to go back and see all the things I did when I was younger, right? So in high
nice.
school, if you remember in high school, there was always like school trips and things like that, like your senior trip. Like when I was in high school, senior trip was like go to Spain. We would take trips, day trips, like to zoos in France. And so it seems very luxurious, but I mean, it was like military kids, right, at the time.
Yeah.
And so once I like sold my business, like I had not been back to Europe and since high
Yeah.
school. And so for me, it was like a chance to kind of go back and see it with adult eyes and really experience it more from a lens of appreciation, right? Because Because when you're in high school,
Yep.
you're just thinking this is just how it is. And you're not really taking in the fact that I'm on spring break and I'm in Spain. Right.
Yep.
And
Yep.
so it was great to be able to like pick a place like that where you can literally hop on a train and travel anywhere and feel super
Yep.
safe in doing that. And then, I was blessed that I was, acquired and I didn't have to think about finances. And so for me, it was just a time to reset, sleep, and kind of go home in a sense and rethink what my next strategy was going to be.
Yeah, I think that's great. It's I didn't realize that it's sort of a going back home moment for you. That would have been nice.
Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So how did that impact your mental health, or in the sense that how did it help you get better, or how did you? Because whenever I travel to new places, I kind of think that I'm becoming a new person because of all those new experiences. Because there is just so much to learn, and look, when you travel, particularly the countries with culture, right? So what was your personal experience based on the traveling? How did it change you as a person, or did it improve your mental health, or things around it?
Yeah, I would say from a mental health perspective, it certainly put things back into perspective for me. I was, when you're in the moment, you don't realize you're burnt out, or at least I didn't realize I was burnt out in the moment. But once I had a
Yeah.
chance to just like get away, I realized how burnt out I was. And being a
Mhm.
woman and creating a startup, like there's so many sacrifices you have to make, right?
Yeah.
Whether you decide you're going to go on a date or if you're going to like stay at home and build something, if you're going to
Yeah.
have kids or if you're going to like try to go fundraise, right? And so there's so many
Yeah.
sacrifices that we have to make. And so it gave me a chance to kind of get back to a life essentially that wasn't
Sure.
related
Yeah.
tied to work, right? It gave me a chance to
Yeah.
actually live a life and have the freedom to go out with friends and reconnect with friends. There were so many people that I lost as friends over the course of running my startup for 5 years because they didn't get it. Like I was always busy. I never had time to meet up for dinners or
Yeah.
lunches and things like that. And, my
Yeah.
work-life balance was non-existent. It was work and that was it. And
Yeah.
so it gave me a chance to just like reset my brain and then also gave me a chance to like
Nice.
open up on new ideas and read books and just have air. And so I think those were some of the things that gave me a whole new appreciation. I would say the other side of it, which was really fascinating, interesting, is understanding the dynamic of what non people outside of the US think of Americans. And so
Yeah.
spending a time a year away from America. So I am not a natural born US citizen. Was not. I came to the country, but I am now. I've taken my U.S. citizenship test and all of that. But prior to that, it was really interesting to be in non like touristy places and tell someone that you are American and get a real reaction about what they actually think of us. And so I
Yeah.
would say that part was really enlightening for me because, growing up, we always lived in different countries, but we always were on a military base, right? So again, it was very
Yeah.
confined. And so being an adult and traveling outside of the country and going to really, really narrow places in Europe that aren't like the
Yeah.
hotels and things that people typically go to, but talking to true
Yeah.
Europeans and their thought of how they think of Americans and where we're at in our country, it was almost
Yeah.
embarrassing, to be quite honest, in a little bit of respect. So that was a whole
Yeah.
nother side of things that I learned.
Yeah.
So that was interesting.
That's good to hear, and particularly the fact that it gave you back your life, right? The trip
Yes.
really gave you back your life, and
Yeah.
that was great. And I think people every now and then we should all take breaks and take a step back from the work because we never
Yeah.
know how burned out we are until we take a break. So do you still take some measures even now these days, or again you are back to the grind?
I'm back to the grind, but I think I'm at a point now where I'm ready to. So, like, I've launched this thing, and it was like creating my own startup within a large enterprise organization. And so, I think I'm at a point now where it's almost time for me to take not another year, but maybe another month or so off. So, looking
Yeah.
at taking like a whole month around the holidays time frame off, but. I think for me, I've just been really mainly focused on ensuring that I have the right team in place, everything's like in place.
Yeah.
I'm doing something I'm super passionate about, so it makes it a little bit easier, right, to kind of be on the
Yeah.
grind again. But yeah, it's getting close
Yeah.
to taking some time.
That's good to hear. And I think that's also sort of a brief template for many founders, right? Hey, it's not that you have to do everything every day. If you have the right team and if you have things in right place, you can probably take a break, some time off,
Yeah.
so that you reset yourself and that you will eventually energize the team as well, and set a good example. Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And I agree that opinions for America are like very mixed. So it can range from quite embarrassing to hatred to respect. Many people, there are quite a few people. Many people respect, and many people have the other opinions as well. Those vary a lot. That I can say, being an outsider. Yeah.
Yeah, there were times where I certainly lied about where, my citizenship. I was like, I'm Canadian, right? Like, of course, I had to lie a few times because when you're in really weird situations and, our political situation back then was a little bit rocky. So there certainly were times where I was a Canadian all of a sudden to get out of sticky situations.
Yeah, that's funny scenarios. But yeah, I think that those are, if we start discussing those, I think those will take another hour or so. But since we are also at time, I want to wrap up this with one last question. So that I always ask, everyone on the show. So can you help us learn something in 2 minutes that took a very long time for you to learn?
Good question. I think in 2 minutes. What took me a long time? There's probably two things, but probably one thing I would say is hiring took me a long time to get right. When I worked at Oracle, I had like a small team that I inherited, so I didn't really have to like hire anybody. Worked at Deloitte and ServiceSource, I hired a few people here and there, but it wasn't really until I had my own business that I realized of, the importance of hiring great people that could do multiple things. And so I was always so focused on, okay, I have this particular role and this particular job. I need somebody that fits this criteria that does all these things. And I realized that I was getting good people, but not great people because of that, right? I was so focused on, can they solve this one problem? And I wasn't really thinking of just hiring smart people that can do anything. And then getting the hell out of their way, right? And so I've gotten so much better over the past few years about opening up my aperture to finding great people that can do many things and just throwing out the job description altogether. I keep job descriptions super broad. I don't really go into many details, and I want to figure out what you're passionate about. Are you a builder, right? Can you see things end to end? And that's basically it, right? If they can do those things and they have a strong learn to be curious background, then I can teach them anything or they can teach me anything. Something may change today and then I need them to go and pivot and do something else. And so I would say for me, hiring has always been like a tough thing because you go in with like all these questions and you're trying to like make sure they can fit into this one box. And I now only ask 2 questions when I interview somebody. That's it. 2 questions. That's it. Only 2 questions. And for me, that has been able to give me strong people on my team that can do a million things and they fit right in. And so I would say that took me a long time to kind of figure it out. And then once you get the strong people, get out of their way, right? Don't
Yeah.
focus on how you're going to solve the problem. Just tell them the problem and let them figure it out and do it however they want to do it. And honestly, it's
Yep.
taught me so much, and it's given me the ability to have people that have full autonomy to just go and do things and solve problems and then move on to the next thing. So.
Exactly. Yeah, I can totally see why you say that, particularly for the fact that I work at Amazon. This is how Amazon typically operates, right? You hire smart people, hire builders, and just get out of their way.
Yeah.
They will do great things for you.
Yeah.
But it's tricky in startup space because you want them to do particular thing, because then you think that, hey, I need to get this particular thing done, but that's not always the case. You really
Yeah.
need some people who can learn on the fly and do it for anything for you. It's not that you hire for one particular thing, and obviously it takes time to get it right. But that is the most important thing for any company to succeed. Thanks for sharing it. I hope many people take a leaf, from your session and do great things. I know we are at time, so again, thanks for being open and authentic on the show with me, Denise, and sharing all your experiences and insights and sharing your wisdom. Again, thanks a lot for all the work that you're doing, and I'm really looking looking at you to see what are the things that I can do. My own may not be at a greater scale as yours yet, but yeah, many people are looking at you to learn. So thanks again, and it has been a great learning episode. So thanks for that.
Yeah. No, thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you.